good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Art Gallery of New South Wales. My name's Heather Whiteley-Robertson. I'm the Head of Learning and Participation here at the Gallery, and I'm really delighted to introduce today's session, Fame and Fortune, Sustaining Your Artistic Practice, which is presented by the Art Gallery of New South Wales in partnership with Create New South Wales as part of Vivid Ideas. Uncle Chicka hopefully will be arriving at some time this morning to welcome us to country, but in the meantime I'd just really like to start today's session by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and waters we meet upon, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to really acknowledge that these lands have been and continue to be a really important place for cultural exchange. So today we're going to be having an engaging session that you fully participate in. What we're going to do, first of all, is hear from practitioners about what's worked for them, and then we're going to have a practical session to try and brainstorm some ideas for your own career pathways. Last year we had a panel as part of Vivid with Arts New South Wales, which of course is now Create New South Wales, called How to Keep Creating. And that just started the ball rolling on this topic of how mid-career artists can find different opportunities. One of the frustrations of the event was that we really only had 60 minutes, and that just wasn't enough time to really scratch the surface on this topic. So today we've devoted 2.5 hours to this topic, and while we might not fully cover everything in the day, we hope it provides some more substantial time for really exploring with your colleagues many different collective ideas for how we can further develop our careers. I'd also really like to suggest to you too that the Art Gallery really sees our role as a state institution as really being here to support artists at different stages of their career, and we'd really like to hear from you during the course of the session about how we can actually further support you in your practice. I'd now like to welcome Nat Randall, our facilitator for our discussion today. Nat is a Sydney-based artist and a core member of the collectives Hissy Fit and Team Mess. She makes work across performance and video, experimenting with interdisciplinary practices, and also co-hosts the FBI radio program Canvas. Welcome, Nat.
Hello. Before I begin, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present and anyone here today. Excuse my Kathleen Turner husk. It's quite sexy. I'm kind of settling into it, but hopefully we can get through this panel. Welcome to Fame and Fortune, Sustaining Your Artistic Practice. This morning we've got an amazing dream team of practitioners here, it's really exciting to get everyone in the same room. As Heather was saying, today has been brought to you by Create New South Wales and Art Gallery of New South Wales for Vivid Ideas. Create New South Wales is the brand new driving force for culture in this state, bringing together art, screen, and most importantly, funding. On the panel this morning, and now I know that it's a bit intense to just read bios, but I think it's really important to see everyone's accolades. So on the end here we have Abdul Abdullah. Abdul is an artist currently based in Sydney who works across painting, photography, video, installation and performance. As a self-described outsider amongst outsider, his practice is primarily concerned with the experience of the other in society. Next to me, I have Alex Wisser, who many of you will know as an artist, but also as a co-director of Cementa in Candos, which was, how long ago was that? 6 weeks ago. You're still recovering, right? Yeah. Amazing regional event. Alex is also living in Candos, and his practice is based in photo media, although he works across installation, performance and video as well. Alex is an active organiser, curating, blogging and writing about the art, artists and the scene, and he's been doing it for many years. Bek, next to Alex, Bek Conroy is an artist, cultural producer and a curator. Rebecca Sorry, just got formal then. Or I was, yeah, sorry. I sounded like your mother just then. Rebecca has been sought after as a creative and critical thinker into interdisciplinary and intercultural contexts, and has been active in developing an artist-led practice and philosophy in Australia, the US, and Southeast Asia. Bree, next to Abdul, is the director of Mama, an amazing regional gallery in Albury. Everyone must check it out and buy all of the amazing collateral. You've got so much good collateral. Go there and buy it. Previously, you got collateral. Everyone's got collateral today. God, bring it out. Previously, executive director of Vox Populi, a contemporary art space and collective in Philadelphia in the US. Bree brings strong management, fundraising and curatorial experience and an extensive network in the national and international cultural sector. Nicole, just next to Bree, is a transdisciplinary artist working across furniture design, photomedia and light sculpture. In 2012, Nicole founded the company Black and White Creative to weave Aboriginal philosophies of sustainability, innovation and collaboration in contemporary art and design projects. And finally, Toby Chapman, who's flown in from Adelaide. He's recently been appointed curator of an incredible organisation which we'll get to talk about, but ACE, which is a kind of amalgamation of two defunded ARIs that then came together to create this bloody mega ARI. And yeah, what a big kind of FU to, federal funding. An amazing kind of outcome for a very dire situation. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Toby. Toby is a curator, producer of contemporary visual art who has developed a broad range of artistic, cultural and educational programs in partnership with local, national and international organisations. What a lineup. And finally, to me, my name is Nat Randall. I've had a little bio over there, but I also work as a bureaucrat part-time at Create New South Wales. So I'm also wearing that little hat and an artist hat and a little facilitator hat. So before we begin, I'd just like to get a sense of the room. Can I get a show of hands of artists? Yeah. Hey, pop it up. Curators? No curators. Oh, there's one. Oh, there's one over there. Arts administrators. Oh, yeah. And maybe arts allies, just because you, yeah, cool, great. That's everyone. Okay, so let's start. Alex. Why are you still making work? Seriously, no, you're like mid-career, right? Why do you still make work? It's hard, right?
No, not really. I don't know. It's funny because I've kind of come, and I'm trying to think about, as I was approaching this day, trying to think about what I would be saying, talking about, because I am actually at a crossroads in my career where it seems that I'm going to be going off in a direction I've never really gone, though my life seems to have been aiming towards this. I ended up, moving out to Candos after putting on this art festival. So I wasn't meant to move out to Candos. We were just going to go up and do our festival, and then, like blow-ins, we would blow in and we'd blow out again. And we did the festival, and it was exhausting, and it was terrifying. And at the end of it, we just never left. Our daughter was in school, and rents were rising in Sydney, and the waters were rising in across the globe, and we just decided to stay, and we ended up in this very, very different place. And as far as continuing my career from that point, that was quite a challenge, because I was going from a context that I knew very well, a context that I relate to contemporary art, which is an urban context, which is a built environment, and going to this one, which is basically it's a natural environment. There are little elements of built environment, but if you want to focus on that, oftentimes that can be quite difficult because you have to ignore the fact that it's in this incredibly unbuilt environment. So that was a big shift, and that took me, quite a while to do. I had I think certain certain elements in my practice that lent themselves. For instance, I liked making art in places where people can't see it. I like to put it at a distance, and then invite people to come, knowing they probably wouldn't. And then allowing them to see that through social media or whatever. And basically, I like enacting that. So the very fact that actually people came out to Candos to see the festival and stuff is kind of, that was a bit frustrating. But I'm dealing with that now too. So I mean, that was one challenge that I faced out there as well. And I'm at a point now where I've moved out there, and I'm now engaged in my community in a way, just as a daily life, not as an artist, but I'm there because I'm an artist. Like I got there because I'm an artist, and I'm, and it's just changing. My audience is different now. Like it's now a community. It's a small community in a country town, and I'm trying to figure out how to talk to my community and how to more than talk to them, but involve myself with them and participate. In that culture, and participate in that community, and that's kind of that's sort of pushing me away more from object-based practice. So. And I am at this point where I'm not sure how I would make a thing anymore, and I'm kind of like, well, okay, I'm not going to make things, then what do I have to do? What am I going to be doing as artwork? And then I'm challenging myself. So that's kind of, I don't know, those are the challenges I seem to be facing right now. As opposed to that, so because I like to make art where people can't see it, I'm not terribly. I'm not frustrated by the fact that I can't get a show in the Art Gallery of New South Wales. Yeah. That's not a hurdle for me. It's, I make the work that I do. I mean, I come out of the ARI scene, so my audience was, the community of artists and art lovers that came to that would travel from Bondi to Newtown, God forbid, and that was all I was really after, and that's my answer.
Thank you, Alex. We'll get more on regional audiences. Abdul, Nicole, and Bek, we've got a couple of mics there. Why and how are you sustaining yourselves right now? And being really frank, because I think we need to get really frank about how the shit we do this. Seriously, how do you sustain your practice?
I sell tea towels like hotcakes. No, that's not really how I sustain myself, although I am selling tea towels. I started a Marrickville School of Economics, so I'm kind of sustaining practice is kind of a really core part of what I do now, or at least at the moment. But I think it helps to be across lots of different things so that you kind of can catch, any opportunity as it comes by. But saying that's not always, you can't always do that. I think I'm pretty lucky that I've worked in a kind of producing capacity. I'm also a writer. I work as an academic. So that, there are some things that I have that kind of make it possible for me to survive. But I'm also not a big believer in having a 100% artist career. I'm actually into, I think, breaking it up and doing other stuff is actually healthy for the artist. That's not also an argument to say that, arts doesn't deserve to be a full-time occupation. It does. But I sometimes think that, doing other stuff complements, an art practice. And I'm talking about gardening or nursing or, just other disciplines, other realms of work. Yeah.
Abdul?
Intellectually, I sustain myself by feeling a need to respond to the political context that I find myself in, and that's not really going away. So that's going to motivate me for a while. Financially, though, the bulk of my income comes from art sales. and
And you're represented, right? So you've
Yeah.
got a gallery that's selling your stuff and...
Yep, I have commercial representation that sort of looks after, like, it's just one of the beautiful things of commercial representation. There's like lots of hurdles and that sort of thing, but having someone else deal with the money side of things and negotiation helps me a lot, because I really, like, if someone comes to my studio and says that they like a painting, I struggle not to give it to them. So that's sort of, so if I've got someone who's there going, no. So I need someone there in that respect. Yeah, definitely.
And Nicole, where are you at?
Okay, so for me, I guess my art practice is about continuing culture. So money isn't really why I do it. I do it because it's within me to do it. I can't not do it. And I mean, I was thinking about this. I think I've sold one thing in 5 years with art as an arts-based practice. My art generally isn't art that can be sold a lot of the time. It's ephemeral by nature. So in that way, I actually have to enter awards, prizes, things like that I can generate money from, and then also get commissioned to do works. So that's how I can sort of get some money coming in. But I also diversify. I'm a trained designer, so I work in the design world as well, which I find feeds my creativity as well in different ways. So that's where my money would come from, and then my my art practice, or I would say that's more deeply resonating with my culture. My cultural practice is not about remuneration at all. So, yeah.
Around about 2/3 of Australian artists are approximately established, and there is a drop-off rate of artistic careers at the kind of mid to latter career range. Why do you guys think this is? Is it because the career path is perhaps like a little unwieldy? Is that the term, wieldy?
Unwieldy?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's actually kind of an issue that I deal with a little bit. One of the kind of pillars of our curatorial sort of structure of Cement is that we attempt to curate across the spectrum of practice. So we try to get artists from all over, so emerging and established. But also there is a large body of later career artists who are, what you call sort of post-arc artists. That, they've kind of, 10 years ago they were big, and they were able to command funding and get shows and stuff like that, and it's basically, but of course, as the art world does, it moves on, the fashions change, and they're all still out there, and they're they still go to art spaces. A lot of them are still quite active, but they are in a very frustrating position because. And I do actually think that part of it is actually that the emphasis that got placed on emerging artists about 8 to 10 years ago as well, which I'm not criticizing wholesale, but what it did was it put this focus on the new and the emerging, and these artists that are brilliant and they've been working for 30 and 40 years, like they just kind of got left off. Because of that, and there is still that emphasis, because that's now built into the structure of the way we do things. That those artists are not nearly as well looked at, and I'm talking about artists who would have shown in the Art Gallery of New South Wales, or Art Space, or and that they're no longer getting invited into those group shows because they're not the hot young thing, I guess, and so there is, I think, that kind of cultural sort of transition.
Toby and Bree, I'll bring you in now. In terms of your sort of curatorial focus, how much do you kind of consider a particular kind of breadth of emerging, mid, or established, and are you conscious of this potential sort of lack of representation of artists kind of mid to post-mid career?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is a serious consideration. I think, like Alex said, for a long time, there has been a lot of support for kind of early career artists, which, again, is a positive thing. And I think perhaps there's the assumption that eventually that leads to some kind of self-sufficiency, whether that's representation or other kind of modes of income. But the reality is, based on kind of individual practice, but just kind of trends in the market as well. That doesn't always happen. And I think from an institutional and curatorial position, it's also important to maintain conversation with artists over a duration of their kind of careers as well. So one thing that we're initiating next year at ACE Open is commissioning 2 mid-career South Australian artists for solo presentations. The idea being that it is kind of an important kind of observation of where they are in their kind of career. And I think probably placing that in a broader context of what is happening, in South Australia, but also nationally, to kind of draw kind of dialogues between more developed practices, say, and what might be more fashionable now, and, drawing some of those connections. And also those projects are about how you continue the kind of more academic or critical discourse, which sometimes drops off as well, I think.
And Bree?
Yeah, look, I think, I don't know if I consciously think about it, but certainly in my new role at MAMA, it's programmatically we're looking at opportunities for artists at all stages of their career, but giving them an opportunity to do something different, or to do something, maybe not experimental, but something they haven't had an opportunity to do before, and being able to do it in an audience space where they're not so familiar with it, where people aren't staring at them, where their peers aren't necessarily all going to be there and say, hey, this looks a little bit different from what you were doing yesterday. So that's definitely there. In terms of previous curatorial practice, I have to say I do kind of gravitate towards experimental artists, which sometimes means you put an emphasis on early career artists, I think. But as I grow as a curator, I'm starting to work with artists over time and see that the most exciting ones, you can see their early practice resonating through their latter practice, and kind of fold, like, not in a linear direction either. It's not kind of upward progress. You don't get better. You filter back into ideas you had, processes you were working with. And so my interest in the artist grows over time as they're doing that as well.
Now, we've got heaps and heaps and heaps of artists in the audience. What do you think, Bek, a mid-career artist actually needs? What kind of support? Like, say you were the Premier of New South Wales for a day. What would you what kind of policy would you make? Like, you'd be like, okay, well, artists need this, and we need,
Well,
that
first,
space. Okay.
I would destroy all the real estates, and then I'd go after the bankers. No, clearly, yes, that's what I would do. But let's be serious. Well, I wouldn't live in Sydney. That's for one thing. It's too expensive. No, I think, it's there's no blueprint. The truth is, there's no blueprint, and I think the whole artist community needs to get a little bit more serious and a little bit more bold about taking on some of the structural change that needs to happen. And I think that getting some confidence around taking over institutions or taking on, housing's a classic one. There are actually really good ideas circulating about how to create alternative affordable housing, but it needs a critical mass around it. And I think artist-run initiatives are kind of hint at that. If you can't find affordable artist studio space, then you have to make it yourself. You have to go and find a space. You have to take it over. You have to set up, an informal, governance system or a formal governance system, and you have to, be an adult and, take things over and take them on. But I think. So doing things collectively together, collectivising your resources, I think that's always a good idea for not just for artists but for anyone. In terms of being a mid-career artist, I think that comes down to a series of lucky circumstances sometimes. You can have stable employment in one job that allows you to be flexible and allows you to return to your artist practice or allows you to have time off. And I think that is, I think there are some practices or there are some jobs that lend themselves to that a lot more. If you've got a cozy, casual academic position that allows you to come in and out.
How deluxe, cozy academic position you
can't
just
believe I
swan
just-
in and
Yeah.
swan in and out of.
So cozy, casual teaching, isn't it? Well, I mean,
that's also an assumption that that artists are academic as well,
Yeah,
and there is
yeah.
this kind of like, all these initiatives that are based around artists going to university, which is also not the case for many people as well, and so yeah.
yeah, sometimes going to university is just about getting another source of funding to be
Yeah.
able to continue doing practice,
Yep.
which, I think does work. But yeah, not everyone should actually, because
Yeah, don't go to university, actually. Hey, Toby, in terms of the current climate in South Australia, what have you seen? What are the differences in relation to artistic practice and the way in which that arts ecology is unfolding?
I mean, I'll preface it by saying I've been there for 6 weeks so far, so I still feel like I'm quite new to the city. And as you were saying before, ACE has kind of emerged as the amalgamation of two former organisations, being EAF and CAXA as well. So, and that was prompted by the cut from federal funding. So there's, a lot of sadness in the artist community around what has happened to those former organisations, but also a lot of support around ACE Open, the new organisation, and the potential to be working, I would say, more collaboratively with artists and also with other organisations. In terms of the artist community, there's also been a lot of support. We recently ran a fundraiser and, raised a lot of money, but more importantly, I think we had 125 people donate. And so I found kind of on an institutional level and also on a personal level, it's been a great reception to a new organisation, and what we are proposing is kind of a new way of working. I think obviously Adelaide is a much smaller city in some ways, but my observation so far is it almost has galvanised quite a small and intense artist community that are very supportive of one another. You've got really wonderful opportunities with ARIs like Fontanelle and Felt Space and Sister that are really kind of pushing a kind of curatorial practice through an ARI rather than just looking at presentation. And look, I would encourage anyone to think about it. It's a very affordable city, so like that's appealing in a
Don't
lot
go
of
to
ways.
university and move to Adelaide. Great. Abdul and Nicole, I'm wondering at what point in your careers have you had this moment where you're like, I can breathe and be an artist now? And what kind of framework of support was that?
I'll tell you when I come across it. Maybe when I moved to Sydney. When I used to live in Melbourne, and that was probably grew up in Perth, and moved to Melbourne for a while, and that was probably a low point.
How was that a low point?
Yeah, I didn't like it. It's too cold, but also I found the community a bit different. But and in Sydney, I found that people were quite warm and inclusive, which I really enjoyed. But I came over here to do my postgraduate studies, so with a APA, so Australian Postgraduate Award, so a scholarship. So I got what's it called, a weekly payment for the first 2 years of my time here, and then since that's stopped, I'm fortunate to be in a position where I can kind of live off my practice. So I guess now is the time where you can sort of. But it's not like you breathe easy, like, I can be an artist. Like, now I have the absolute privilege of being able to produce what I want to do. Like, if I have an idea, I can make it, and I've got the space to make it. But at the same time, I still got to have that idea, and that's really hard.
And Nicole?
Yeah. For me, yeah, I just had a baby as well. So to put that in context with making an arts career, sort of monetizing an arts career, it's almost impossible, I guess, and for me, again, it's about culture, so it's not about the money, so I have to do the design stuff sort of on the side. So, and you've got to chase that work down. There's a lot of work there to being an artist. It is not a cruisy, easy, I'm going to be an artist because it's an easy way out for my lifestyle. There's a lot of administration. There's a lot of work. I cannot believe how much administration there is. It's like you almost need.
Yeah, what's a percent of your kind of making and admin time? What's your percentage?
Oh my God, I
breakdown?
don't know. I reckon it'd be close to. I mean, I'm always thinking, my brain is always ticking over. I do not clock off being an artist. So in that respect, it's continuous, but the administration, it's constant too, You're always replying to emails, you're updating your CV, you're redoing your bio. They want a 200-word one, they want a 100-word one.
Sorry, I wanted a 150.
Yeah. And it's just like, so the whole time, people want to do an interview. They want you to come for a panel talk. You've got to read the questions.
Sorry,
It's all your fault, no. But these are the ways that you do generate money. So we get paid to come here
this
today
is another
to have a
thing.
chat
It's
with
like
you,
to be a spokesperson as well, like this kind of advocate, this sort of relentless advocate that you can't.
Which is something that does not sit as me as a person as well. To be here, I'm super what do you say? Like I get all butterflies and I feel angst and I'm like, oh God, I've got to talk in front of all these people. What are they going to think about me? So you're
I feel
always
terrible.
No, don't be silly. Yeah, but I do it because I want to keep practicing my culture and I want people to know about my story, and I can't not do it. Yeah. So don't worry, I can't not do it. It is not your fault.
I just want to point out, I don't want to speak to you because you're a mother. Obviously, I want to speak about families and the negotiation of mid-career. Obviously, we're all kind of getting older and different things happen in our lives, different sorts of relations. How do you balance that? How do you balance the sort of family, Alex? To add, are there any opportunities in relation to, residencies or anything that account for families? And, you can't just detach yourself to get an opportunity. Are there networks of support for artists with families?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a good question because I'm about to have another child. Yeah.
Congratulations over there.
Yeah, it was about 10 days from now, so I'll have another kid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, I know. And I'm thinking about how am I going to make art? I'm not going to get any sleep. I've got to, I remember what that was like. So I don't know. So my partner's an artist. She's a painter, and we've sort of worked hand in hand. We used to live in and run an ARI space together with our daughter, and that became a really great situation. But she went to National Art School, and I think she graduated around 2004, and she was told in the art school that you cannot be a mother and still succeed as an artist. She was told this by one of the dinosaurs that were living there at the time, and that's still it's what. Of course it was. It was. There were a lot of them. I used to call that the land that time forgot. That school, and and so that's definitely there. And then so she's actually the one who kind of picked up on that, and so her practice is actually it's a poured paint practice, and it's something that she can't do continuously. She can't go in for 6 hours and just work on it. She actually pours the paint and has to wait for it to dry. So then she started to weave that practice into her daily life and the things that she did with the family and stuff like that. And that was quite an amazing. An amazing thing. With children, there's a lot of issues, and I'm sure I'll hear about it later when my daughter gets a therapist. There are a lot of issues. There was this great party scene that she got to be a part of, and which wasn't it wasn't too wild, but there were also I think issues as well in terms of being able to focus on her, and we had to learn how to do that. We had to learn because in my opinion, artists are basically children ourselves. We had to learn how to be parents and adults to her, and to break away from our own obsessions to focus on her and give her time. And then that whole conversation that happens in my household is just keeps feeding in the way that I now address my community, or the way I address other artists, and the way we try to look after people. That all comes out of trying to learn how to be a good dad and being a good partner, and all of those relationships and all the things I've learned out of that relationship has spilled over it's become in a large part, the heart of what I do. Which is it's often about care, and learning how to care for your family is a good way to start if you're trying to learn to care about other things as well.
Thank you, Alex. Bree, I know that there is a residency program at Mama, right? And you can bring family. Is that true?
Bring it on.
Yeah.
We love kids.
Everyone check that out. Go onto the Mama website. You get a big house, right?
Yeah, it's not on the website though. Don't look on the website. Just reach out to me.
But that's quite amazing. I know, Bundanon, as everyone would know, I think, can you still take partners? I think they've stopped. Have they stopped doing that? You can't take children. That's right. Yeah. But Bree, what is the program that Mama offers?
It's in its infancy, but we have a house, and excitingly now we also have a residency that we're developing with the waste management facility, which is this awesome, very kind of progressive waste management facility. So we'll have a studio in there. We have a house. The house is a 5-bedroom house, very rudimentary, in the Botanic Gardens. Some people get creeped out, but it's fantastic. And I think Mama's philosophy really is about welcoming everyone. So that idea that children aren't welcome in a gallery or at a residency, or somehow that would hinder your artistic practice, is just kind of, it's pretty outdated, I think. So the residency programs need to kind of front up and let kids come, and the artists who don't want the kids around need to just relax, basically.
What are the perceptions of regional New South Wales as a place to make and develop art? And do you think it's changing?
It's a great question, but I will say I've only been living in regional New South Wales for 6 months. And, I'm trying to get a sense of what people's perceptions are. I think what I like is I'm starting to hear that, people in the city don't necessarily think that what's happening in the regions is second rate, which is really fantastic. Of course, it must be said that, regional Australia means many, many, many different things, and I happen to be living in what is really a regional city, so I'm not sure if I'm the best person to ask about that. I think it's fantastic. Of course, studio space is very cheap. If you are happy to work in different jobs and maintain studio practice, then there's work there as well. But you are isolated from a larger arts community. So, I think it's a great place for mid-career artists, so you get away from that the intensity that sometimes comes when you're emerging and there's so many things happening and you've got to say yes, you've got to do this, you're showing all the time, and then that newness kind of drops off a little bit, but you still got all the relationships, you're still being asked to show, and you take yourself away from that sort of frenetic energy and sit in your studio and work. I think that's a great thing for some practices. I'd encourage people to come and do my residency and check it out, and experience it, really.
Abdul, we're talking all things kind of practical today about sustaining one's practice. Do you have any tangible suggestions for people about how you've managed to keep making?
There's I read this book early on called The Black Swan Theory, and it's a book on economics. And one of the anecdotes in there was that there was this a swindler, and what he did was he sent out 10,000 letters to prospective investors. With 5,000, he said, this stock is going to go up, and then 5,000, the stock is going to go down. And then say the stock went down the next day, he sent just the 5,000 people that he got right. He sent half of them that the stock was going to go up, and half of them the stock was going to go down. And then he kept halving it. So at the end of the day, there was 100 people or something that had got 5 letters in a row that had just been right. And and he said, invest in me. And then they invested in him, and he ran away with their money. I'm not I'm not that. What I'm saying is that
tangible suggestions, people. This is great. This is a great panel.
I've mucked it up, haven't I? There's just all right. That didn't make any sense. That was totally irrelevant.
All right, I'll give you a question that I said to Bek earlier. If you had kind of control of today in relation to policy making or opportunities, interventions, what would you give a mid-career artist right now?
Oh, cost of housing and space. I'd repeat that. That's cost of housing across the board with everyone, and and then specifically looking at artists who have studio-based practices. Getting a studio anywhere near the city is near on impossible and super expensive. Like my studio, I'm in Mascot, in Alexandria, and my studio costs like as much as my two best friends in Perth are paying for their mortgages combined. So it's sort of like,
how much is that? Do you mind sharing?
They've got cheap mortgages, but like it's I still pay like $1,000 a month for my studio.
Right, and on top of accommodation as well,
top of
obviously.
accommodation. So it's quite significant. Can you come back to me on tangible advice? Because I'll think about. Yeah.
Nicole, do you have any sort of words of wisdom?
I think taking any opportunity, I'm a yes person, I think. I say yes a lot, and I've just started to turn that corner where now I'm like, I'm too busy. I need to start saying no, but that's good too, because then you start to choose the things that you want to do. But in the beginning, say yes. You know,
I'd like to echo that.
Yeah, just try it. You've just got to get out there. You've got to get in front of people. You've got to talk to people. People need to know about your practice. You need to talk with the curators. Let them know the thoughts that you're thinking and the stories that you want to tell and why you want to tell it. You know, networking, as much as it's a dirty word or whatever, it doesn't have to be. Like for me, it's just having conversation with people and just having a chat. It's like an everyday thing. Have a meal and a cup of tea, and you just have a good yarn, you know. And then
the networking thing is kind of interesting though, and I don't know. I mean, you know, Bree and Toby, how do you like to be approached? I mean, it would be really useful to kind of get a sense of the etiquette. I think I've got terrible email etiquette when I'm trying to get in on a program or get seen. I don't think I approach it the right way. And I don't think in terms of me being an artist, I don't really sell myself well publicly. What do you suggest as a kind of mode or etiquette in relation to, approaching producers, curators?
I remember what I was going to say now as well.
Bree?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think... I don't know. I always just say to artists, just do whatever you want, really, because there is no formula. You know, if you're asking me personally what I like or what I look for, what resonates with me in creative practice is generosity. So, if people are doing the asking all the time, but there's no evidence that they're giving back, obviously not to me, but to other artists or to the creative community that they exist within, then that makes me less inclined to want to say yes or assist them. But that's just a personal thing. Yeah, I think I just would go back to do whatever you want.
And Toby?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar. I don't think there's etiquette necessarily. I mean, one thing I think I learned from, people that kind of mentored me over the years was this question of, to ask of artists, what is it that you want to do that you haven't been able to do yet? And for me, that is probably something that also kind of drives like my curatorial practice, or the way I like to work is trying to provide opportunity for artists, and also that basic thing that, obviously we don't exist in a curatorial vacuum, that, the majority of the ideas that we're thinking about are in response to artists. So, I mean, it's always encouraging and essential to hear what artists are doing themselves. And so for me, it's just then, how can we kind of best collaborate and best kind of, work together?
And Abdul, you remembered your bit of wisdom?
Yes. I go into schools a lot. I do lots of school presentations and talk to kids, and I get a lot of emails from kids who are doing the HSC, or I think it's called HSC in Sydney, but doing their year 12, and they'll send me an image of their work and they'll get advice on it, sort of thing. And I'm happy to sort of respond to that. And one of the pieces of advice I give is that, are they going to study art next year, or are they going to study something else? And if they're going to study art, then I tell them to go with their gut. But if they're going to study something else, I say just do a really realistic painting and get the best mark that you can and use that. And taking that that idea is that I'm a pretty outcomes focused person. But any opportunity that I see, I want to be able to, how can I use this next step as a step to get me closer to that next thing, as opposed to thinking of this as just one outcome in the end. And I see that a lot. Maybe it's still a cynical view coming from Perth, but I'll see a lot of my friends that I studied art with is that they'll have a project and they'll put all their effort in, and then there'll be like 6 months where they just don't do anything after that sort of thing. But so using that as a leveraging one project into the next, I guess, is a kind of really practical way of doing it, and like momentum and how important that is to sort of use one thing as an opportunity, and also seeing everything as an opportunity to get closer to the next thing.
Thank you for that little bit of wisdom.
Can I just add to that, the blueprint thing, or the kind of, there's a tendency, or there's a desire to find what is that right way. Like, how do you approach a curator, or, what's the formula, how should I address the email to the curator? But I think it misses the point of what it is to be a practicing artist, which is to be fully involved in the world, to be involved in a culture. And I think because...
community, like how important community is.
Yeah, like it's not about the individual. I think it's more about that. It's relational. And so I think, sometimes there can be a tendency or an accusation that it's very cliquey. And cliquey is just another word for saying that this is a very intimately interconnected community that
Melbourne's
does
cliquey.
go off names. Do you think Melbourne's too cliquey?
See, I really like Melbourne, so...
I would say Sydney is because of the topography means that there's lots of little cliquey ghettos in a way. And Melbourne's kind of really grid-like and straight and horizontal. For me, it seems more, less cliquey. That's interesting.
One bit of advice that I'm going to give is that someone, I think, it was Lara Toms, who's a practitioner from Melbourne, said you just need to know when to spend 1 minute on an email or like 1 hour on an email. Like, that's actually a good piece of advice. I don't know if anyone's agreeing, but I don't know. I was like,
I agree.
God, that makes so much sense.
Time management.
Yeah.
But Lara Toms is good at doing that, though.
Yeah,
She's like,
I know,
1 minute,
yeah.
no more. That's it.
The final question, which we'll zip through because we've got questions after, utopian futures to each of you, from your perspectives as artists and curators, in a couple of lines, what are possible alternatives to the future of an art practice in Sydney, in New South Wales, in Australia, to where we are now? Alex.
Well, yeah, I guess because this is exactly what I'm looking at, which is, an art context that is embedded in an art practice that is embedded in a context other than the art world. And so the outcomes that happen in that context, the work made relates to that context, contributes to it. That's kind of the most exciting thing that's happening to me in terms of where I see my practice going.
I'm starting a laundromat. It's called Money Laundering, and it's a serious idea. And I think the future is laundromats. No, I am setting up a laundromat for artists who want unconditional, paid, flexible work. Minimum wage. The minimum hourly rate is $25 an hour, which actually compares very well with the arts, where after you finish counting all the hours, it's like
So people work
$2.
there, you mean?
Huh?
What's the model?
So we're setting up a laundromat that's going to allow artists to come in and work for shifts at a time, 4 hours, 10 hours, for weeks at a time if you want to, or not work for several months, so that artists can come and go and always get a kind of retainer and get their rent paid. And laundromats are great because you can do all your admin while you're doing the laundry at the same time, and it's also very mindful work as well. I worked in a laundromat. It's very like ironing. It's very mindful.
Have you taken over some laundromats?
No, I did a covert paid internship at a laundromat to test out my theory, and it was great. It worked. Yeah, got a lot of admin done.
Toby?
I think for me, it's if there was a broader acknowledgement of the value of artists and kind of artistic critical thinking, not just within the arts community, but more broadly. I think artists have really wonderful, compelling and, you know, exciting ideas that have application outside of our world. And I'd like to see that taken up by other people.
I concur. I think for me, a national Indigenous cultural centre would be a great space for everyone in Australia to be able to engage with art and Aboriginal art. I think a focus on New South Wales artists. I think that's something we forget a lot about in New South Wales, is to look at in our own backyard. I think opening up spaces that aren't being used by the City of Sydney and offering them not with just reduced rents but free rents for artists. And I also think building new spaces for artists should be, you know, I feel like we get used a bit in a way that they bring us in to make these places all interesting and exciting, and then they gentrify them, yeah? And they don't, you know, and then where do we go? You know, they actually need to make some spaces that cannot be taken away from us, that are ours, and that they show that they have that appreciation for what we bring to the culture of this country.
Amazing. I totally agree. Bree?
Yeah, I think my answer's a little bit lame. I think in terms of utopian futures, maybe, I don't know, I sort of think maybe we're in it in some ways. You know, I was away from Australia for almost 6 years and I've come back and it's different, but there's really exciting things happening here that are different. And yeah, funding might be more difficult, or maybe the market's collapsing and rents are high and that's terrible. But the creative energy is present and constantly problem solving. So I don't sort of have an end point for it. I just am kind of glad to be back and be a part of it, I guess. Yeah.
Abdul?
I don't know if I can imagine utopia, but I was in I spent a lot of time in Jakarta in the past couple of years, going back and forth, actually wearing a hat from one of the collectives there. And what I found really sort of motivating was this really collective mentality that artists in Jakarta is a city of 1 million people, but there's 20,000 artists because of the particular art school that people come from all over Java to. And there's no government support, there's no commercial support, there's nothing like that. But groups of artists will get together and as a collective build each other up. And maybe one of the artists will sort of break through on an international level somewhere else, but then it's his response. He feels obligated. No, obligated is the wrong word, but he or she will then bring everyone else up with them. So that idea of coming up together and really supporting a community. And one of the criticisms that I have about Australian art, and it's not across the board, like there are definitely communities that work together, but there is still an individualist sort of capitalist mentality where you kind of want to. There's a competitiveness sometimes, and not with everyone, but you can sort of feel it, and you kind of isolate yourself, and there's less of that collectivism that I really, really admire about the artists in Jakarta.
Beautiful note to finish on. Now we've got a bit of time for some questions for the panellists, so I'll give you my mic if anyone has a question at all.
How is everybody? Hope everyone's good. I'm a really shy person, and I've got the interpreter here to voice for me, and I hope he makes me sound assertive. So I find it really hard as a deaf person and an artist, and it's not really easy for me to get any support out there in the real world. And for many years, I feel like people have just pushed me aside because of my deafness. And that's how I feel. And I'm trying to get deaf artists together to work together, and but it's not working. Is it me? Is it myself? I'm a very good artist. I do it very well. I'm very creative. I'm an amazing artist. I know what I can do. And but I think it's the fact that my ears don't work, that I'm not getting access to anything. Because if you look at my paintings, they're amazing, and sometimes they must see my name at the bottom of my painting and they go, "Ooh, there's that deaf artist. Let's not talk to him." But for me, it's like I just I see these other contemporary pieces of art where they're just completely different and they're a little bit odd, but people pay lots of money for them And I just think to myself, well, am I being disadvantaged because of my disability? And so that's where I'm at, and I just wanted to share that.
Did you say that you were trying to get some other deaf people together to make a little collective?
Yes, I do, but not very many of them are out there.
Okay. Yeah, because for me, I've tried to get collectives together before as well, and I work collaboratively a lot as well. And the relationships within that can be quite difficult, and they're a whole nother set of skills that you need to make those relationships work as well. So you're not alone in trying to get people together and it's not working. That happens to a lot of us artists, I guess, because it's about ideas and stories, and everyone's so passionate about their own story that when you get together, it's really a lot about
A sort of negotiation.
a
of egos.
negotiation, yeah, and then what collectively you want to do together. So there's a lot to negotiate when you're working collaboratively or with a group of people. That I think is it's just a general human thing. But yeah, I think as well, being a minority, I'm Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander. Abdul Abdullah, we're sort of both from minorities, here as artists, and it's always a struggle. You're always up against a wall. Yeah, so I feel for you.
I guess I can answer to that same dimension of your question around trying to generate a community, especially in a situation where that community doesn't arise organically. Like, because I came out of a scene that grew up pretty much organically. It happened, and I was lucky enough to be in the right place, and I've learned and got to where I am because that happened. And then I moved out to the country where, where everyone's isolated and everyone feels disconnected and ignored by the art world. And I recognized that right away, and wanting that community that I was missing, thought I could jump in there and generate it. And yes, the distances, when trying to get someone to come to your show, they have to drive 2 hours. That's a hard thing to do. Or if you want to have a meeting to kind of to talk about a project that you're going to do, that's again another hard. But the thing that I found most challenging was that in that situation, and I really haven't solved the problem. Like, I haven't kind of nutted it, and I don't know that I will. Is that all of those artists, they all feel isolated, and that isolation is a barrier for them to actually come together. They feel isolated from each other, even though, if they could cross that barrier, they could actually. So a lot of the frustration that they're feeling, it's internalized and it's personalized. It's turned, and they become this moat, an isolated entity, and then trying to get them to work with another artist. All of that resentment comes out, and it's just a very, very difficult thing. I mean, I've had sort of projects sort of blow up in my face, and I'm like, wow, I was just trying to get us together, and here we are yelling at each other. And I think that's what you're facing, and how you get through that. I agree with you completely that it's a very difficult thing, but it's that's I think a rich ground to try to get into and try to work at and look and observe, and try to push past a lot of that. Of that dysfunction and those blockages that are keeping people separated.
I'm just aware, my government hat on Create New South Wales, our priority area is also, in addition to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander practitioners, people with disability is a core priority area in relation to arts and cultural projects. So if you are wanting to seek funding, we do have applications open at the moment, and we do have fellowships that are designated for people with disability. So yeah, that is absolutely an area in which I guess New South Wales government is addressing in relation to arts funding.
Just to chime in as well, the grants is another great thing to try to tackle. If you haven't written a grant, try to go to a grant writing seminar or something, because that again is a whole nother set of skills that you need to acquire. It's very difficult, and to be able to acquire that funding. So,
and on the grant writing thing as well, better than going to one of the workshops and forums is try to find somebody who's been successful at writing them, so that you can show your grant. I mean, that's how you'll learn how to do it, is having somebody who knows the language it needs to be and the structure you need to look over your work.
Can I just add that I think there's a tendency for the emphasis to be on the individual who is speaking from a minority position or a disability or not in the mainstream. But I think there's also a need for practicing artists in their communities and to practice a culture of diversity, or to look around and just check themselves and make sure that, you know, rather than speaking out and saying, well, you need to get better at accessing the doors, maybe the terrain that you're occupying needs to also be interrogated, and we need to look at how accessible that is to other people who might experience some challenges accessing it. What can we do to, you know, change that or diversify it?
Sorry, I just want to add to that with Bek, also from Create New South Wales, and I think it's up to us also to diversify our framework and the people who work at Create New South Wales, and I think we've made a step towards that. And just in relation to the gentleman's questions, I mean, we now have a work colleague who is hearing impaired, and it's actually that creating that awareness within the staff about the things you need to change to make access more possible. And I think the programming we're doing around trying to increase opportunities for people with a disability or can also increase the profile. So therefore, kind of creating this sort of, you know, greater sort of awareness of the works that people from a diverse range of backgrounds are doing can help improve the opportunities for people across the board. We've got a long way to go. I'm not saying we're there, but it's very much on our radar, I think, now.
So I'm in more of the beginning stage of my artistic career. I decided against going to university just because in England it is far too expensive. So I'm going more of the route of gaining experience, internships, that sort of thing. But the one thing I've noticed is people like see my art, they say, oh, we love it, it's really good, we think you have potential, but you have no social media presence, so we're going to go with someone else. And I really resent it because I think, why should I have to put my stuff on social media and build this, you know, have loads of followers on Instagram or anything like that when that's not the route I want to go down. So I wondered what your thoughts were on building a social media platform and dealing with that is just kind of part of life now.
Yeah, I think that's as a practicing artist, I take full responsibility of my social media and that sort of stuff, and I think that I need to be responsible for that sort of thing. I can't leave it on the hands of anyone else. And we were talking about being commercially represented before, and I have a person that represents me commercially, but they have got I don't allow them any other control over what I do. So not any type of marketing, not any type of curatorial stuff, especially curatorial stuff. I want complete control of that, and part of the social media is part of that. And I also see that as an opportunity for new audiences and that sort of thing. And so much of what I do is about building a platform, just to have a voice and an agency, and social media is integral for that. So I would really recommend it.
I'm just curious. Do you have a rationale? I mean, so you know, is it just a personal dislike of it, or is it actually sort of something that's integral to your work that you feel that it would be distorting the meaning of your work, or is it just something you personally, you know, kind of don't like social media, so you don't want to be on it?
It's not that I don't like it. It's more just I don't like the fact that it's a necessity to be an artist nowadays. And that is just kind of, that's the experience I've had is like, you're a good artist, we like your work, but because you don't have a social media platform, we're not going to hire you or use you as a freelancer. And I guess maybe that's just something I have to deal with and start building a platform on social media.
No, I mean, I think it's fundamentally untrue. You know, you don't have to have a social media practice to be an artist, to be a practicing artist, but to be a particular kind of artist that, you know, that will be engaged with whatever institutions or galleries that you're approaching. Well, that's one of their requirements. So in order to be able to, I mean, you know, Abdul's very practical and pragmatic kind of approach is that, well, these are the things I have to do in order to be able to mount the career that I'm building, the particular career that I'm building. He's you know, he's willing to do those things. He doesn't see any essential contradiction with the meaning of his work. You know, I, on the other hand, who, you know, like to show work where no one can see it, I'm still a practicing artist. And in fact, you know, that whole thing is predicated upon social media. So like I actually, you know, I'm very engaged with social media because, you know, it's a way that I can actually do this thing that's absent and then still have some sort of presence within it. You know, I'll never sell artwork that way. I'm never going to make a quid out of it. But, you know, there's strategic, you know, decisions that we make. And I think that's what you're facing is that, well, do you take the strategy of going along with the advice of these people that if you want to succeed, you need to do this? Or you think, well, no, that's actually going to be, that's contrary to the meaning of my work. And, you know, there's a strong statement in being able to, you know, withdraw presence from social media, for instance. So there's definitely room to make significant work that way. But then you have to make that a plank in your, you know, in your rationale, in you know, your thinking.
I want to add one more thing to it because I kind of remembered something else from before. But like with the Black Swan, part of my career is finding those black swans, like those super rare, impossible opportunities that have flowered into really good stuff. So I need to be available and put myself in as many situations as I can to discover one of those black swans, and social media is just one of them. But it's like one aspect, but I try and do it everywhere. Does that make sense? Okay, no worries.
Hi there, guys. I'm very interested to hear what your feelings are about Australian artists and their relationship internationally. Like, there doesn't seem to be a lot of. I mean, I live in London and LA. There's no publicity. I'm Australian. There's no publicity for Australian artists. It doesn't seem to be an outreach program by the government here. Do you see yourselves? How do you interact internationally? Do you want to interact internationally, or do you care or not?
I don't think the Australian government really cares too much at that level of having I mean, I think there are various trade programs attached with arts and culture, but it seems to be more of a kind of cultural, paternalizing kind of approach. That's been my experience, having spent a lot of time in Indonesia. But I think, I mean, the answer is going to depend on what's your practice and at what level you have those relationships. I think international relationships with different artist communities overseas is really essential, I think, because I think it's nourishing, it's nurturing. I definitely need to have relationships with communities, other artist communities internationally. I find in terms of the circulation of ideas as well, it's very, I find it really conservative in Australia. So for me, it's essential, and I'm not too fussed that there isn't a junket, wanting to, broadcast the Australian arts community in that way. Others might have a different experience.
Abdul, you've exhibited internationally. What's your perspective?
Well, a priority for me is placing myself as an artist in the region. So in Asia Pacific, through Southeast Asia, through Pacific Islands, that sort of thing, and being involved in those conversations. And I've spent a bit of time in London and the United States. And it's funny, like talking to some MFA students at Goldsmith, and like we tried to name an Australian artist. So I tried to get them to name an Australian artist, and they knew who Ron Muick is, but they didn't know he was Australian. So that's like a common thing. Like it's not. But personally, it's not essential for my practice to be involved in conversations in those parts of the world. For me, I'm looking more locally and regionally, and sort of as one of the other privileges of being an Australian is my capacity for travel and being able to go in and out of countries pretty easily without visas and that sort of thing. So I feel a greater responsibility to connect artists from different countries, like Bek's saying about Indonesia, go to Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and like connecting communities by being an artist working on the ground. So that's not that benefits me in the way that my practice sort of gets developed by being exposed to these different approaches, but it's not necessarily strictly like I'm doing this for me, but it's just a part of sort of a communal responsibility.
I'm interested to find out how you effectively manage the multiple hats in Nat's the way Nat talked about it. One, she's an artist and she's a bureaucrat. Alex, you're an artist and a festival director. Nicole, artist and designer. So like some comments on that.
I mean, I guess it's the first and obvious thing is you juggle. That's what you do. I basically, I'm commercially I'm a photographer. So, and that was a lot of the way that I'm like Bek. I prefer to make my money outside of art. For me, it just clarifies things. I like that contact with the world that you get from a job that you don't necessarily like. I just, like it makes me feel like I'm grounded. But being a photographer, I then started to focus on art documentation, on performance documentation, and then that allowed me to see a lot of art, to talk to curators. So I think, always being able to kind of be somewhere that'll allow you to be in contact with the thing that you're interested in. Like my original job actually was, I worked for the local newspapers, the suburban newspapers, and that was such a great job as a photographer. You're taking terrible photographs, like they're really corny, but you got into these amazing places. Like you got into people's houses that nobody wanted to get into because they were just complaining about the pothole. But then you got to see how people, you got this access into this world and you got to see it. And that's definitely, informed my practice. And as a photographer, that became a really, really important thing. So being able to choose things, and this is not always possible, but being able to choose a job that's not too far off from what you want to where you want your energies to be, or like, I think like a laundromat, a job that will allow you the time and space to think and to dream. If you can spend those times, I've worked more as a dishwasher than any other profession in my life because it's that same thing. It's actually a really amazing intellectual, imaginary space when you're doing a repetitive thing and your body's moving, your body's working. And your brain can just detach and go anywhere it wants to. Yeah.
So for me, I'm a trained interior designer, so working in places and spaces, and I find that working in a field that is complementary to my art practice is a great way for me to keep thinking about the way we interact with the world. And I love being creative. I love being hands-on, but I also have this part of my personality where I really like structure and, I don't mind rules in a way. Like, I work with the Australian standards and the building codes of Australia and materials. Everything has to be safe. There's all these different things, but those things also transfer into my art practice, but in a way that I kind of know the rules so I can break them. Yeah. So they're quite complementary in that way. And but I guess I'm lucky because I have both those parts within my personality, and I find that there's a really nice balance for me that I can have that really sort of, I can work with piles of dirt one moment and then the next moment I'm making a chair that someone has to be able to sit in and it's not going to collapse. It's got to be structurally stable and, all these things, working with engineers and architects and doing all those sorts of things. And those things keep me alive, always having something new and interesting to deal with keeps me going. I really love that. And I guess, it's your personality has to be able to juggle, you have to like to be able to juggle. I'm working on a plethora of projects, from art and design, from exhibitions to furniture to light to video works to all these different things, and your mind really needs to be able to switch, yeah. And I think as well, becoming a mother, I am when he is sleeping, I am working, and I have to be able to get focus like that, yeah. I just have to I'm working now, and boom, I'm onto it, and I'm going, and I'm. It's very much about, time management as well. You've got to be able to manage your time super structurally. What you're doing, it is like, it's awesome. I love it, but it's a job. Yeah, it is a really hard job, and it's not something that I take lightly. It's very important to me, to my core person, that what I do, and that I do it really well. I don't want to put anything out there that is a half of a job. Yeah, that to me does not cut it. I have to give my all in everything I do. So to do that, it's very much about time management and having those skills. So yeah, I guess I got told this thing once by a friend, and it kind of made me a bit sad, but he said, a creative business, he goes, there's 20% creativity, 80% administration and
That's
the
your
back
breakdown.
end.
That's your
That
breakdown.
wasn't my breakdown. That was his breakdown, and it made me feel really sad because I was like, I actually want there to be more creativity in there. So I guess it's about, for me, it's about trying to make the creativity more and the other stuff less. But how do you do that? There is a lot of administration. There is a lot of thinking in ways that aren't particularly creative, but I don't mind that. I enjoy the polarity, the difference of those two things. Yeah.
We've just about run out of time. Please put your hands together for our amazing panel. Abdul, Bree, Nicole, Toby, Bek and Alex.